Hey y'all, this is Gray Crawford, and I'm going to talk to you about this very intense Scorpio new moon taking place on Friday, November 1st. Now, this is a Scorpio new moon. I'm a Pisces, so I'm close to lots of Scorpios. Always have been really good friends with them. Always some of my best friends, my most loyal friends, my deepest friends. In fact, I'm even married to a Scorpio. And if you have a Scorpio in your life, you know how intense they can get, how deep they feel things. Also, though, how loyal they are. And also, you don't want to cross a Scorpio. Scorpios are not the enemies you want to meet or make. They are relentless. There's that watery, passionate, cool internal quality of Scorpio where that red hot heat and fire of Mars thrives. Mars is extremely powerful in Scorpio. And what's interesting about this new moon is it's in Scorpio. It's also in the first decan of Scorpio, which is also connected with Mars. But Mars is actually in Cancer, another water sign. Mars likes being in water signs, but Cancer is actually the fall of Mars. And so there's an interesting quality there that's been going on all across this past month of Mars moving all the way through Cancer, through its fall. Mars can be much more extreme in Cancer, much more volatile, kind of running in that sign of the moon and the fluctuations and the great changes, the moodiness, the ups and downs, the waxing and waning of that Cancerian place. And at this new moon in Scorpio, Mars is at the very, very end of Cancer, about to go into Leo and about to finally complete its opposition with Pluto. This opposition between Mars and Pluto has been building and building and building, getting more and more tense, building pressure. As far back as a month ago, when we had that Libra solar eclipse, they weren't like really close together as in terms of the opposition, but that Libra solar eclipse at the beginning of October was squaring Mars in Cancer. And then it moved from that, the moon moved from the square with Mars into a square with Pluto. And so it really, that's the one that to me really kind of set it off in the beginning, being an eclipse. And then, of course, things really culminated and became more explosive potentially or disruptive in your life or just more anxiety provoking at that Aries full moon a couple weeks ago, which is forming hard square aspects with both Mars and Cancer and Pluto and Capricorn. But there's other sides of the Scorpio new moon that are important to keep in mind. Now there is again this intense polarity of oppositional forces and tension between Mars and Pluto, which is going on, with all the great conflict and warfare and just mass murders, genocides, just horrible things going on in the world. That's one side of it. But there's also always with Mars Pluto incredible power and desire. And that is what you really need to focus on with this new moon is pulling things back. Now, maybe if there's events or places in the world where things are going on that you want to get involved with and be an activist towards and take direct action and try to organize things in that way. And that's really part of your internal drive and what's really important to you right now. That's great. And that's a great focus for you. But otherwise, this is definitely a new moon to pull things back and prioritize what's just going on in your world, what truly needs the most focus for you to get yourself in the best place possible. Because we have so much change that's going to be going on this next year. And even within this lunar cycle, big things are going to be happening. Within this lunar cycle, Pluto will leave Capricorn for the final time and enter Aquarius, where it's going to be all the way until the 2040s. We've had Saturn go in retrograde for months. Saturn's going to be stationing direct right around the time of the full moon, pretty much the same day as the upcoming full moon in Taurus. Full moon in Taurus, it's conjoining Uranus. We've had lots of full moons conjoining Uranus. I've been writing on my astrology blog for over 12 years. There's always these full moons conjunct Uranus. Their cycles just line up. Those are going to keep going on. And for years now, we've been having them take place in Taurus. So if you have important placements in Taurus in your chart, you've been used to for years now having these full moons aligning with Uranus. We've had a lot of them. Well, they're going to still happen that we'll have full moons conjoining Uranus in years ahead, but we're never again going to have a full moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus. This is the last one because next year Uranus goes into Gemini. And although it comes back to Taurus again a little bit, it'll end up going back to Gemini, and we're coming to the end of that transit. And when Saturn stations direct in Pisces, Saturn's going to move forward and move all the way through Pisces into Aries. And along the way, it'll be following Neptune, who's also going to leave Pisces and enter Aries next year. So, in the months ahead, we have so many huge changes going on that this Scorpio new moon is incredibly important to just pull things back, figure out what is your deepest desires, what do you really want to focus your resources on, and use that relentless drive of Scorpio to go after what you want. So the new moon in Scorpio, as I said, it's taking place this Friday, November 1st. Interestingly, of course, Scorpio is such a martial place, so associated with Mars. But this new moon, not only is it taking place on the day of Venus being a Friday, but it's also in the bounds of Venus. And even more interesting to me is that it's very close to a conjunction with the fixed star Alphecca. Alphecca is a star associated with Venus and the great goddess Ariadne, the consort and bride of Dionysus. Ariadne is a great goddess of Crete. And one of the things Alphecca is connected to is friends, support, community that can help be part of what uplifts you to greater honors and success. And so, in addition to figuring out your own desires and what you need to really focus on and get taken care of in this lunar cycle ahead, because remember, Saturn's going to be stationing. So, there's real consequences coming here on the horizon within this waxing moon that we're about to enter. But also figuring out, who are the friends you can count on, who's part of your community, who are the loyal allies that are going to be with you and fight with you and support you, and that you can mutually work with, collaborate with, uplift each other, inspire each other. We have hard times ahead in the world, but that doesn't mean everything is perpetually doomed. And this is a really important period of time that we are about to enter in the years ahead where things truly matter. There's lots of discord going on in the world. There's lots of conflict. There's lots of people trying to start fights, start conflicts, lots of people out of integrity, lots of false leaders, lots of false stuff, and just complete lack of integrity going around a lot. It's all over the place. So that doesn't need to be you, though. It's very important this time to stay in your integrity. If there's other people starting to start drama, start fights, stay in your integrity. Don't get dragged by that. Let them drag you down, and don't get dragged into things that are not worth your time. Now, maybe there's something you do have to fight for. There's something you do have to protect and you do have to defend. But otherwise, if it's just things that are not that important, this is the moon in fall, ruled by Mars in fall. The downfall of planets in fall is getting dragged down into things that just are going to waste your energy. There's a deeper side of planets in fall, though. Planets in fall know how to go into the underworld. They know how to go into deep mystery. People that have planets in fall even if they haven't formally been initiated into some sort of spiritual sacred lineage of one sort or another, they tend to have the kind of underworld type of experiences that very much initiate them into this deeper place inside of them. It's a very scorpionic quality, actually. And that's a thing to really be tapping into at this new moon. Really, again, connecting to what matters and really focusing on that in this lunar cycle ahead. So, as I mentioned, one of the really big things is just this oppositional quality. So, Mars is applying very closely to an opposition with Pluto, which is a big deal because Mars, of course, rules the new moon. And at the same time, Jupiter's retrograde coming back, Venus is in Sagittarius moving forward. So, they are mutually applying into a very tense opposition as well. Now, in this case, Venus is in the sign of Jupiter. Venus is being received by Jupiter. Venus and Jupiter being in an opposition isn't really like the most difficult aspect in the world, but it still is an opposition. It's a polarity. There are different parts of your life and chart that might be, kind of going back and forth. And if you're at a place like that where you have these tensions building on either side, sometimes, you just do have to kind of cut through and make a decision and be really clear cut in that way and move forward. But if you can and you have the time, allow that tension to play itself out. If you can hold that tension and be curious about what is that mystery and deeper meaning of that tension that's playing out in these different areas of your life, a lot of times a solution just kind of emerges. It sort of takes care of the whole situation. So that's definitely something to keep in mind with what's going on right now. But as I mentioned, we are building to this full moon in with conjunct Uranus that has Saturn stationing direct on the same day. This will be November 15th. And so this is something to keep in mind just here as we're at this new moon. The Mars-Pluto opposition is, of course, really extreme, but we can see we have another very powerful Uranian, lightning strike type of lunation coming up that also involves Saturn stationing direct. Again, stay in your integrity. Focus in on what matters. What do you really have time, resources, and energy for? What are your true goals right now? What kind of deadlines do you have? What kind of business do you really need to take care of? And focus on getting that done. You need to play the long game here. There's a much bigger story unfolding with all these aspects that are playing out. The Mars Pluto thing will be playing out for months. It's not a time to be burning bridges. It's a time to be building bridges patiently, brick by brick, building your community, building your friends and alliances, building the things that live up to your true integrity and values right now. We need as many people as possible doing that, taking leadership, taking command in those kinds of ways. And there's going to be consequences coming for the people that are not doing that. And one of the things we'll probably see around this full moon, for example, is with that stationing Saturn, this Uranian lightning strike type of lunation. Sometimes in our lives, we have one of these full moon Uranus conjunctions and it's not really that big of a deal. But sometimes something really pivotal and life shaping can show up very suddenly at these lunations. I always feel with Uranus, the best way to work when we're in a period where Uranus is going to be activated is to just be focusing in on that work and path and meaning that's most important to you that really, brings you alive. Because that tends to work best with Uranian types of aspects and things like that that come through. So after this new moon, there's going to be a lot of movement because not only is that Mars and Pluto opposition still building, but the day after the new moon, Mercury will go from Scorpio, where Mercury is very slow, plotting, getting undercover, getting all the inside information, going really deep into things, but also moving pretty slow into Sagittarius, where Mercury moves really quickly and fast. Now, normally or oftentimes, Mercury moves through Sagittarius pretty quickly. This time around, Mercury will be moving along through Sagittarius at a pretty good pace. But once we hit that full moon, by the time we move through that full moon, Mercury's going to be slowing down and then slowing down. And by the time we get to the end of this lunar cycle, Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde around 22, 23 degrees of Sagittarius on November 25th. So, right now, again, at this new moon and Mercury going into Sagittarius, it's again a great time to really be productive, get things done. You can always keep in mind that Mercury's going to eventually station retrograde and come back, but it's honestly not something you really need to worry about during the first half of this lunar cycle. It's a great time just to get things done, move things forward with whatever you're trying to work on. And so the other big thing, though, is not only does Mercury move from that kind of slower, internal, deep feeling water sign quality into the fast, separating fire sign of Sagittarius, Mars is going to do the same thing. But just before Mars goes from Cancer to Leo on November 3rd, the next day, Mars will finally complete the opposition with Pluto. And then soon after that, Mars will move into Leo, where Mars will also, in some ways, we could say symbolically start moving faster. We would normally think that with Mars going from Cancer to Leo. But in terms of Mars's actual cycle, Mars is slowing down here because a month from now, around December 6th, Mars is going to station retrograde in Leo, about 6 or 7 degrees of Leo. So in the whole next month, Mars is only moving about six or so degrees. So there is this really concentrated quality of Mars that comes in here on November 3rd. And, so this new moon basically opens with Mars changing signs, but slowing down. And so things will be, again, intensifying with this sort of concentrated focus. Now, we know with Mars going retrograde next month, in the months ahead, there's going to be lots of things changing in the world. Obviously, this particular ingress right here is happening right before the US presidential elections. So much is going to be changing in the United States that we don't totally know the whole story of yet. And it's going to probably be playing out for months, right? And we can see this with everything going on in the world as well as our personal lives, because that November 3rd opposition will be the first one. But then once Mars goes retrograde, they will form another opposition at the beginning of the new year on January 2nd of 2025. Then after Mars comes back towards the end of February, stations direct in Cancer, moves forward again, they will have one final opposition, April 26th. So this is a long story that's going to be playing out between Mars and Pluto. And so there's something really fascinating about this particular Scorpio new moon connecting us into the first one of these three aspects. That Mars-Pluto opposition, it can be really difficult in world events. And we've had Mars, retrograde opposite Pluto in the past as well. This isn't like a completely unusual thing to have. We had one back in kind of end of 2007, beginning of 2008, when Mars was retrograde in Cancer and Gemini, and Pluto was at the end of Sagittarius, about to go into Capricorn. It actually was right around that aspect was kind of led into the whole economic collapse that happened at that time. And we don't know what all is going to happen this time. But Mars, Pluto, at the end of the day, it's all about desire, power, empowerment. And this is a time to really deepen into your desire, set those intentions, and focus on relentlessly getting that done, whatever it is. So, what's interesting about desire in Scorpio is that this new moon is taking place in the first decan of Scorpio. This image of the Five of Cups by Pamela Coleman Smith has some strong associations with the meaning of the first decan of Scorpio. It's the face of Mars. And in Austin Coppock's book on 36 Faces, he really emphasized just that hunger, the hunger and drive of Mars in this first 10 degrees. People that have great desire, that have great ambition, there's often a great hunger just fueling them. Those people that just are working around the clock, they're just so obsessively focused about doing whatever they want to do, being the best, achieving whatever those goals are. And so, there are some good outcomes that can sometimes come from that incredible drive in terms of, really achieving great things in the world. But when we're talking about hunger, we also have to be wary of a scarcity type of complex and a lack or a fear of lack or a fear of, not getting enough of whatever it is, which can lead people to become bullies or just act overly aggressive or oppressively, taking more than their fair share, trying to show off or take other people down, taking other people's resources and that kind of thing. And so with Saturn stationing at the full moon coming up, Saturn is a planet that I love, and there's great things about Saturn, but Saturn can go with bringing fears of scarcity. And so that's something really important to keep in mind here at this new moon. And to, again, because it though is such a burning place of desire, getting in touch with your desire and what you truly want and what you truly desire is going to be really powerful at this time. And notice, maybe there were some things that you unconsciously just thought you wanted, you thought were part of your vocation or your values or what's most important to you, that you're actually realizing now, no longer are. And so there might be some old desires to lay to rest in that way. And if you've been dealing with difficulty or dealing with loss, just like this image is showing with like the 3 cups spilled, be grateful for what you do have. Focus on what you do have, what resources you do have, what desire do you have and possess to get things done in the world, and use that to move forward. Because what's interesting about this new moon is it's at the final degree of the first decan. And so shortly after the new moon, the sun will enter the second decan of Scorpio. And while the first decan is the face of Mars, the second decan is the face of Jupiter and the sun. And just like this Pamela Coleman Smith image of the Six of Cups is showing, very different vibe than the first decan of Scorpio. This comes very much into relationship, community, giving and receiving. That there is receiving in the giving there's receiving. Again, this idea of building community, building networks of support for those that are the victims of the genocide and the victims of the disasters, and building your community and alliances and the people that you're going to be able to collaborate with in the years ahead. We're going to really need that community. It's important to think about your behavior and your actions and how that's making you look like to other people, and being somebody that's building up community by living out your values, living out your priorities, living out your ideals. You then, of course, attract other people that share those values and those priorities. This decan is also interesting when I brought up earlier Ariadne and her connection to Alphecca. And there is that sacred marriage of Ariadne and Dionysus. And so there's something also really interesting about that, because that fixed star degree actually projects into this decan too. And so, there's also just loved ones, whether that's romantic partners, family, children, or just really close friends and community that you have. That's going to become an important focus as the moon is waxing towards its eventual fullness. Now, something else, though, about the first decan of Scorpio, where the new moon is actually taking place, is that in the Hellenistic text, the 36 heirs, it ascribes the nymphs to this decan. Now, I love the association of the nymphs with this decan because the nymphs are so much about desire and incarnating in a body, our soul incarnating, and what are those deeper desires of our soul, fully incarnating, embodying that, really embedding that, integrating that into our body, into our life, into our work. This is an image of the nymphs along with Hermes and Pan that I took a photograph of at the National Archaeology Museum in Athens a couple of months ago. I was in Greece, traveling through Greece with my wife, and then I was part of leading a group of like 20 astrologers through different sacred sites. It's a really life-changing experience being there. And also why I haven't actually made any videos recently because I was in Greece and then had to get back and readjust to my life and everything else here. But I am going to be back to making videos again. But my experience of Greece was really powerful. And my experience of the nymphs and the spirits of the land, as well as like the nereids, water nymphs, and spirits, was just really powerful and palpable there. And when my wife and I went to Ithaca or Ithaki, one of the sites we went to there was the Cave of the Nymphs. Now, if Ithaca sounds familiar to you, you probably know Ithaca because of it being the home of Odysseus, and it's that island in the Odyssey where Penelope is waiting for Odysseus to eventually return, and when he finally does, he goes to the Cave of the Nymphs. Now, these are images here of a Cave of the Nymphs that's on Ithaki, on Ithaca. And one of the things I just was found fascinating being in Greece were finding these different nymph sites that would be in caves, also often in springs. And so there's something about this like underworld type of cave and darkness and interiority and as well as that watery spring quality that the nymphs also love. These are qualities that really go with Scorpio. And I'm just sharing this image here again just to sort of further emphasize the need for this incarnation, this interior descent into soul and desire, and really making a commitment and pact with yourself to be loyal to whatever that is and to focus on that and make that happen, whatever that is, and set really clear intentions at this new moon because so much is going to be changing from here on out this next year and in the years ahead. And as you go into that deep interiority, into that cave of the nymphs, and feeling that desire, if you're at the cave of the nymphs, like this image is showing kind of facing the cave, if you just turn around to look the other way, the other side of, if you turn away from the cave of the nymphs, this is what you see, which is an image of Mount Neritos in Ithaca. And we can see here, taking that inner desire to see far ahead, far over the mountain peaks ahead, far into the sky of imaginal vision, and let that really open up for you, whatever that is, whatever restrictions you have right now, whatever things you feel are in the way, the Saturn obstacles that have been going on for you, let that loosen in your mind. Just like Ariane and the nymphs like to run with Dionysus. Dionysus is the loosener. Let that loosen up and let yourself really feel what is it that you truly desire and what you really want to create and what do you really want to live with your life. And really take that in at the Scorpio new moon and really commit to that. Saturn's going to be stationing at the full moon. You're going to have to come back into whatever limitations you have and everything else and kind of ground into that. But it's important sometimes to step back from that for a moment to let yourself really feel this bigger vision of change that can be possible so you can actually start taking steps to work towards that. And so, whatever that is for you, I really hope you can feel into that and set to work on making that happen at the Scorpio new moon. And thank you to everybody on Patreon who supports me. And if you're watching this and you're not a member of my Patreon, I invite you to take a look at that. There's lots of educational opportunities you get through joining my Patreon, as well as meetings that take place every month. But thank you all for being here with me, and I'll see you next time.